Okay, so that's going. Now it's working. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. I'm Marshall, your host, and I am going to talk to you today about, let's see here, burnout and how to manage burnout in Kriegsspiel because it's actually a big deal. It's one of these things. It kills games, it kills communities, it kills players pretty much. It's a pretty bad thing. So I want to talk about how do we manage burnout. I'm going to start by apologizing. I think on the Patreon live stream, I probably broke that. I had an issue with the streaming software coming live. There wasn't really a way to test that, but when I checked it, everything looked correct. But for some reason, nothing was streaming. In any case, I hope it's all working. But we are here, and it is time to get started. So let's talk about today's topic. Goodness. Okay. Let's see here. I'm going to talk about burnout. And burnout's kind of a big deal because it's one of these things that we deal with all the time, whether you're an umpire or a player. As an umpire, you get tired, you get burnt out, and a lot of games just get abandoned. And that happens all the time. Guilty, been there, done that. Life changes. So what'll happen is, you'll set up a game, you'll be running an event. Maybe you have the time to do this, but then your job changes. Something changes in your life, or I don't know. You have a kid, you get a dog, you do something. Something happens, it changes. The end result is you end up getting burned out because you can't keep all these plates juggled in the air without dropping some. And you have to start prioritizing your disasters. And, obviously, hobbies are one of the first things that gets dropped. There's a problem with people who bite off more than they can chew. So there's all of these reasons for uh, legitimate burnout and why people just kind of drop out and go by the wayside. But there is a way to manage this stuff, and it's something that I wanted to talk about because it's something that I go through periodically. I've been involved in Kriegsspiel for a very, very long time. Obviously, this community's been around for at least 2.5, maybe 3 years now. I don't know. It's been around for a long time. For me at least, it feels like it's been a long time. And I get tired, and I know that we have a bunch of admins and other people who we have promoted to high positions in the org. But there is a life cycle to players, there's a life cycle for admins, just like there's a life cycle for any product in business, right? The product gets introduced, it becomes popular, it peaks, and then it just kind of fades out and disappears. And that happens, to all kinds of people because that's just how life works. So how do we deal with this? Um, One of the things to look for is burnout. And burnout, the hallmark of burnout is not a person being tired all the time. It's different from exhaustion, okay? Exhaustion is something where you can go to bed or you can take a short break, take a weekend, take a long weekend, take a week. And you come back and you're invigorated and you're ready to go. You're anxious and excited. In fact, after you're gone for 2 or 3 days, all you can think about is your hobby and having fun and getting right back into it. In reality, if it's really working for you, it should be energizing to you. It should motivate you. You just become a beast and you start doing things. But the problem with that is you can get into a burnout situation. The real hallmark of burnout is cynicism. So you want to look for people who become smartasses. Well, here's one right here, right? You want to look for people who become cynical, who become critical, who become negative. If they stop interacting with you on a positive level, if all they have for you is criticism, if all of they're doing is whining, they're not contributing anything, if they stop contributing and all they're offering is criticism and critique, that's a hallmark of burnout. Now, that person will eventually remove themselves from the situation because they're burned out. They're tired of it. There's only so much they can take. They've reached their maximum. They're basically going to check out and disappear at some point. So that's burnout, and you want to look for that. Burnout can be caused by a number of things. One of the biggest things is a lack of reward. If the workload that is required for a person is too great and the reward that they receive in exchange is too low, then they're going to stop doing something. Imagine, for example, you take and you go through months and months of preparation. You prepare this really cool event, this big, huge game, and you run it. And then at the end of the game, everyone just kind of says thank you, and then they disappear. And there's just really no payoff, no reward. There's no after action reports. There's really nothing for you. There's no, anything. And if it just kind of ends there, you end up feeling like, wow, I put all this work into something and now it just kind of disappears. And sure, people had a great time, but now what? And you kind of feel deflated. And I know because it's common. It's a thing that happens because there's practical reasons for it, right? How do people reward you? What reward do you expect? I know that when you play, you can ask players to do after action reports. But that's one of those things that feels like homework, and so it's harder for players to do that. There are practical limitations. What are they supposed to do? Send you a trophy? Buy you a beer? I don't know. But that's one of the things. I think one of the big things that people like to see is they like to see recognition. They like to see the game or the event talked about for days and weeks after. They like to see that, they expect that the excitement and stuff will trail off. But just, talking about the game, talking about the experience and things that you had, that's going to buoy up that umpire, the person who planned the game, and help keep them from being burned out. That's how you get your payoff in Kriegsspiel, in this hobby. Now, that is a reward that you should earn. That's not something that you should be entitled to. If you put months of planning and preparation into an event, but the event stinks, believe me, I know, you're not going to get that reward because, well, the event was missing an element. It's like you make this beautiful dinner, but you didn't add salt to anything, or you forgot to season it, you cooked it wrong. Well, people are not going to say amazing things about the dinner despite the amount of work that you put into it because the food wasn't very delicious. And it's the same thing with the event. So now that's a whole nother matter. How to plan and prepare for a game and run a successful event is another matter. But yes, the reward has to be commensurate with the level of work and effort that you put into it. And if there is no reward, there's going to be burnout. There's a lack of control. If you are a subordinate umpire, let's say you're an assistant umpire, this is something that happens to assistants. It can also happen to players. If the umpire has the player on rails, meaning the player can't really deviate from something, the umpire has in their mind that this player is going to start here in this corner of the map and they're going to end up here no matter what. And the player feels like they completely lack control. They're just kind of there along for the ride. Like they're just there to kind of read what happens. They're reading a script and they're following a script and they don't really have any autonomy or control. Likewise, an assistant umpire. If an assistant umpire's job is just you take care of this army over here and you move it to this location here, and the only thing you're going to do is roll a die and apply the result on the die. If the assistant umpire has no feedback, if they have no discretion, if they can't, call a shot, if you will, or make a decision or anything like that, if all they're expected to do is simple busy work for the lead umpire, the assistant umpire can get burned out. So those are problems. So a lack of agency. If the community becomes toxic, if it becomes negative, over competitive, things like that, that causes burnout because people can't run at 100% all the time. We always talk about giving it your all, being at 100%. People can't do that. Okay, 100% is not. Do you run your engine in your car at 100% all the time? No. When you drive, even if you could, you would not put that pedal to the metal because you would burn out your engine, right? And cars are very expensive. People are the same way. Your car engine is probably going to run about 40, 50, 60%, 70% of what it can do. And that's kind of the average, and it's average for a reason. That's what average means, and that's where you should be. If you are applying yourself at 100% all the time, it's like a runner who is sprinting as fast as they can. You can't do it. You have to think of it as a marathon. You have to pace yourself. You only sprint when you need to sprint. You're passing another runner or you're at the finish line, then you sprint. And it's the same thing in your work life, and of course it's the same thing here in Kriegsspiel. There are limits to what you can do, and you should pace yourself so that you don't burn out. You should not be going all out, creating 1,000 pieces with custom names and stuff, a custom order, a battle. If you are doing this level of work where you're creating all these pieces yourself, and you're, creating a map by yourself or something, and you're doing all of this work, and you are essentially sprinting in an effort to pull off the ultimate event, you're going to burn out. I guarantee you. You're going to become exhausted, and by the time the event comes around, you will have lost it. You're done. It's over. And that's going to be a problem, of course. Annoyance is an issue, but the problem is annoyance is common. There's going to be all these things. Players are going to get on your nerves. Other people are going to get on your nerves. There's people like me who joke around a lot and all the time. That annoys people. And annoyance is an issue. And if people become annoyed, they are going to be burned out, right? Because every time they interact with you or they interact with your event or something, they don't get a positive reward. They don't get a dopamine hit. They get an annoyance. And there's just a limit to that, right? If you're a nag or something like that, if every interaction with you is an interaction that costs them some part of their happiness or their energy, they're going to be annoyed. There has to be, and I understand because I'm a big believer of this, there has to be a certain amount of pain and suffering in an event in order to keep people engaged. But that has to be mixed up with reward because that's how the human brain works. The model for that is the slot machine. If you ever go to Las Vegas or Atlantic City or a casino and you play a slot machine, right? You don't win every time you pull the lever. If you won every time you pull the lever, and then at a certain point you lose, well, you're going to stop playing that machine because the machine took your money and you expected it to pay you every time you pull the lever. So the way they have it is they have this thing called intermittent rewards. It's a psychology thing, and you pull the lever, and maybe every 4, 5, 10 times you pull the lever, you're going to get some kind of a random reward. So you keep losing money because you're hoping that when that reward comes, it's going to wipe out your losses and you're going to profit somehow. A lot of times, of course, it's not really how slot machines work, right? Ultimately, they take your money over time. But that's what keeps people playing. And it's the same thing in Kriegsspiel. You do have to create pain and suffering for your players, which should be created organically, right? Because you're simulating warfare, they're going to suffer losses. The troops become tired. That's modeled in the rule system. And so the player will eventually degrade. But all around them, other people are also degrading their combat capability. So in a way, it's kind of fair. And ultimately, there should be something where they get a reward. Like, hey, you pulled off a flank attack. The enemy is routed. That's the reward. So, maybe you sustained, 10, 15, 20% losses, but now the enemy's been outflanked and they're retreating. Now you have a reward. That's going to help prevent that burnout. So that's important right there. Feeling unaccomplished and unappreciated. Those are things too. If the Scientologist taught me a long time ago that productivity is the basis of morale. The more you produce, the more you create, the more reward that you should get, and ultimately you should feel appreciated. You're not going to feel appreciated if you don't produce anything. You have to produce something. Okay? Not everybody, I'm not a fan of the participation trophy. And I don't think many people are. That's for little kids. But for adults, no, you don't just get a participation trophy because you showed up. Even though, yes, that took some effort, that's the minimum. If, on the other hand, you go and you produce an outstanding effort, then yes, you should receive kudos for that. You should receive appreciation, and you should feel accomplished. But on the other hand, if you do all the right things and you don't feel appreciated, if people are always cynical, if all they have for you is criticism, then yeah, You know, it's just like when you do a critique as an umpire, when you critique the players. If all you have for them is a beatdown, if you're just going to say, you messed up, you messed up, you messed up, well, are they likely to play with you again? No, they're not. So those are causes of burnout. So understanding that is important to understanding then the solution. So let's talk about some solutions. The first solution I would suggest is to keep your events short. One of the things that will burn you out is running an 8-hour game. You run an 8-hour game 2 or 3 times, nobody's going to want to play your games because people just don't have that kind of time. Again, this is something we do as a hobby. This is a reason why we don't play like the original Kriegsspiel rules very often. It takes a really long time to run them, unless you have a good player to umpire ratio and you can get through it quickly and everybody kind of knows, all the umpires at least know what they're doing. If you can get to it quickly, yeah, sure, you can play 1824 Kriegsspiel all the time. You can play 1867 Kriegsspiel, no problem. You can do all of these things. But the problem is most people are just not at that level. And ultimately, what happens is you get burned out. You know, in the Prussian army, the players were captive. They couldn't leave. But here in Gameland on Discord, we can leave any time. We can just disconnect and go do other things. There's nothing that compels us to continue to play an 8-hour game. If we get to 4 hours and I feel like, hey, I'm done, I pull the plug, I walk away, and what are you going to do, arrest me? What are you going to come do? You know, come kick my rear? No, there's nothing you can do. So you need to keep games reasonably short. 3 to 5 hours, I think, is reasonable. Anything above 5 hours, you really start to push it. So you want to keep your games short. That's the games that are run live. Let's talk about play-by-post games. I've been in play-by-post games that have run for 2 years. I know Ozakarski ran a Kriegsspiel that I played in that was 2 years long, with updates that happened about monthly or so. So that wasn't too big a deal, right? You're just sitting there, and then one day an email comes in from Jim, and it says, hey, you know, it's time to, you know, here's your report. What do you want to do? And you do what you're going to do. You submit your order. That's not a big deal. But I have been in games that have lasted, I'm in games that have lasted for months, and I can feel the umpire getting tired. I can just sense it. The time between the updates slows down. The quality of the updates begins to diminish. The umpire is getting burned out. And of course, what you can do as a player in that case is you can encourage the umpire, say, hey, I'm having a great time. I'm always looking forward to the next update. This is a fun event. Keep going. You know, hang in there. If a person needs help, you might say, hey, do you need help with your event? Because sometimes all an umpire needs is somebody to step up and help take on some of the duties that they're doing. That can keep a game afloat. But really, I really think that the best play-by-post games and the best play-by-post games that I've run a number of events. I'm often running something. I often run them in secret because I like to kind of handpick, and I like to have these curated events. I've run a few secret Kriegsspiels, which I haven't really announced to people. I've either handpicked the players or I've had just a very limited window of sign up, and then I disappear it. I delete the sign up. Nobody else can join once I have my players. But I'll run an event, and maybe for about a month, and that's about it. So if you keep your events short, like 3 weeks to a month, generally you don't have time to get burned out. The other thing is, do allow yourself a day or 2 or 3 for the updates. Now, you can run daily updates. That's fine if you're excited. But again, you have to limit the length of the event. Otherwise, it becomes a chore. Once umpiring becomes a chore and there doesn't seem to be a reward, if the players are a bunch of idiots, if they're doing silly things, if you're having to chase down players for updates and stuff, that's going to cause you to burn out, and you're going to want to stop running the event. People will often bite off more than they can chew. So my advice to you is keep the event short, keep the event small. And if you can, get help to run the event so you're not running it all by yourself. Because even a short, small event that you're running by yourself, you can become overwhelmed. So it's always good to have one or two assistants, even if it's a small event, because they can pick up some of the slack. If you get sick, if you go on vacation, if you have a period where, hey, I got too much work or I got too much family life going on, I can't run this game, then keeping it short and having an assistant allows that person to kind of step up and pick up the slack. And most good assistants will pick up your slack for a short time, a few days, a week, whatever. And then, you can kind of ease back into it. I've had assistants where they've done such a good job. It's been like, you know what? You just kind of run that. You've been running that so well, you run it. And they love that. A lot of times they like that because they have the autonomy, they feel empowered, and they run with it. And again, as long as the play-by-post is short, again, 3 weeks to a month, you're going to have kind of an optimum experience. When the play-by-post gets long, either you better be very, very dedicated, or you're going to get burnout. Okay? Other problems. Or other things, other solutions, I'm sorry. One of the things I'm going to tell you is play other games, do other things. Don't just play Kriegsspiel all the time. It's kind of like having, filet mignon or something for dinner and lobster for dinner every night. Look, those are great delicacies. It's wonderful to eat those things. But if that's all you ate 3 times a day, every day, after a few days, you're going to get sick and tired of it. And imagine now that's all you have to eat. Like there's nothing else in the world to eat. That gets pretty old. It's going to become the cause of suffering, and you're going to daydream about something else, and it's not there. So I would encourage you, play a mix of things. Don't just play Kriegsspiel. I get it that people want to play Kriegsspiel, or they want to play Kriegsspiel style games. Like, you can play Hex Encounter, but play it Kriegsspiel style. That's cool. But don't just play one event. Don't just do one thing. Get out and touch grass, as we call it. Get out of the house and go do other things. Go have a relationship. Go clean something. Go get a job. Go do something else. Go have another hobby besides Kriegsspiel, because, again, if all you do is this 24/7, you're going to burn out. So diversify, okay? This is one of these things. It's like ice cream, right? You can have ice cream, but if all you eat is ice cream, you're going to get sick. You're not going to be healthy. So eat other things. Take it from me, king of food analogies and food. All right. Take a break, but stay in touch. One of the things that happens is people get burned out and they just disappear. And then they don't ever come back. They go on to another interest. They take up some other activity. That's fine, because that's what people do. But I would encourage people, if you need to take a break, but stay in touch. Stay engaged with the community. Check in every day or every day or two. Look at a few posts, say hi, like something or whatever. Stay connected. That's where I've been, especially this year, 2023. I've been crazy busy all year with work and other life experiences and things going on. It's been very hard for me. This has been a very tough year for me in terms of Kriegsspiel, simply because I just have so much going on across the board. Other things going on. It kicked off in January, and it has not let up, and it continues to be intense. So this is my work life. And the result of that is I don't have the mental energy to put into running an event, and even just participating is very, very hard for me. And so I become very choosy and very selective about the events that I do participate in. And even then I feel kind of bad, because I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm giving 100% to my event. If it gets in that situation, make sure perhaps that you have somebody who's working with you, or somebody who you're involved in. For example, I'm involved in a Vietnam Kriegsspiel where I have a pretty important role, but I have a lieutenant in that event who is really doing a lot to help out. That lieutenant really probably should be the person in command, because they are so devoted and they are making such good choices. They are really filling in my lack of knowledge, and they're stepping up where I am deficient. On the other hand, I'm just kind of making the big overall strategic decisions. That's probably correct. But at the same time, having that subordinate who takes the baton from me every now and then and directs and makes some of those micro decisions that I should be making, but I just don't have the mental energy to do, tremendously appreciated. So that person should know who they are because they know they're in the event. And if they watch this, I want them to know that I deeply appreciate what they're doing. Um, but yeah, I'm still engaged with the event. I'm still participating. But right, take a break, but stay in touch. Stay connected with the community. But yes, go ahead and take a break. Let people know you're taking a break so they know that there's nothing really wrong with you. Keep people updated. It's also good to make friendships and to connect with people on a personal level. Give them a phone call now and then. If somebody starts to kind of drift away, call them up. Like literally give them a physical phone call them on Discord or message them on Discord and just stay in touch with them. Maintain the relationship. Eventually they will come back around. Here's one of the big things. Before you commit to running a game, because a lot of people get an idea and 24 hours later they're announcing a new event. No, don't do that. Don't do that. I know it's tempting to do that because you want to strike while the iron's hot. And that's cool. You should strike while the iron's hot. Even better, you make the iron hot by striking, right? But the thing is, you need to make the right connection. You need to make the right strike. You have to hit in the right spot, right? Otherwise, you end up with a bent sword instead of a nice straight sword with a good edge, right? You got to do it the right way. And you want to do it the one right way the first time if you can. So here's the deal. Have a long planning period before you commit to running a game. Let's talk about me. I'm planning this Halloween game. I did not have a long planning period. I had a short planning period. And now I'm eating it because I had all these plans for the run up to the game. And I'm having trouble with the module. I haven't been able to execute my plans. So I have this game that I have to run in 1 week. And my level of preparation is absolutely below par. Now, I'm still confident that I can pull it off because I've done this a million times. But the fact is, I'm going to be shooting more from the hip than I want it to be, more than I'm comfortable with doing. Fortunately, I still have a week to kind of correct this. But in real life, my workload is just doing this. It's like a hockey stick. And that is causing me to take time away from planning and preparation. So my best advice to avoid burnout is have a long planning and prep period before you even announce the event and before you run the event. So that way you know that everything is in place and everything is working and you're going to have a much more smoother experience. Plus, you're not going to have this long stretch where you announce a game and then you run a game. If you announce a game and recruit players, but you don't do anything for 1 or 2 months, that's toxic for players. It's going to be bad for players. They're going to lose interest. They're going to drop out even before the event really kicks off. So you really do need to strike while the iron is hot, if you will, but you have to strike in the right place. So have that planning done so that the players walk into a complete curated experience. They don't have a lot of questions. They know, for example, what their order of battle is. They know where they're at. They have their mission. They know what they're supposed to do. They know what the time commitment is. They have an idea of how long the event is going to run in terms of real time. You know, this is going to be a month long or 2 month long or half a year long event, whatever. They know what they're getting into and they can kind of hit the ground running and get into it while they're excited about it. But if you recruit players and they just kind of sit there and there's nothing going on for a month, well, they're going to get bored, they're going to drop out, and they're not going to be there when it's time for the big game in many cases. All right, being prepared gives you a smoother experience, and that means a bigger reward. The smoother the experience is, the better the game is, the more thrill that players have. The person who does this the best, I think, is Otto. Otto Vosky will do a lot of planning. He will submit a 100-page planning document with all of the orders of battle, all of the history and stuff. I don't think he writes it all himself. I'm sure he's pulling from other sources. But he does prepare. He does do all of this work. And you have all of this wealth of information, and it's a big deal. That preparation makes a difference. And so definitely you want to have this long prep period because the more prep you put in, the better the reward. Okay, be choosy about what you do. Don't sign up for too many games and maybe play only with certain umpires. So certain umpires are better than others. If I run one of my private Kriegsspiel events, it's probably going to be a premium experience because I am going to put that work into it. I am going to be committed to it. I'm going to run it, but it's going to be tiny. It's going to be small. It will be a good experience, but it's not going to run for a long time either because that's how I operate. That's what I do. When I try to run these big, huge, tremendous monster events, if I feel unsupported, if I feel like I'm on my own, eventually I will break down and collapse. I can't do it. I burn out. And so certain players, certain umpires run certain kinds of events. There are players, umpires who are really good with running monsters. Carter is perhaps the best example of that. Carter only runs monsters as far as I know. And Carter is very good at recruiting a team of umpires to help him run the monster game, and he will run these monster play-by-posts. In fact, in 2 weeks, we have Grand Leipzig, which again, I would consider that a monster. Now, if it were me, I would say we shouldn't have more than maybe one monster a year. But I think this is Carter's third or fourth monster this year that he's run. He ran Grand Waterloo, and actually, no, that was not Carter. That was really Blaze Trail. Okay, another one of my big favorites. But yeah, too many monsters is too much for people. I really think we should only have one, maybe two per year. But here's Carter, and that's all Carter does, because Carter is a monster. But I've also noticed that Carter's kind of been, I don't see or hear too much of him anymore. Again, life changes, things go on, he's earning that big degree, and he gets tired, just like anybody else. So I would say be picky with who you play under. Just because an event sounds cool, if you don't know anything about the umpire, try to vet them first. Try to see, do they run their games to completion? How big are their games? How long are their games? And so on. Be choosy with your umpires, even on open Saturdays, right? That will ensure you a better experience. Let's see here. Make sure that the time commitment is something that you can do, especially if it's a play-by-post. If somebody's running daily turns and you just can't put that kind of time into it, don't sign up. Or if you get into something and you realize, hey, I can't do this, bail. I've had people do that to me, and I appreciate it when they do it right at the start. They're like, oh man, I signed up for this, but I don't think I have the ability to follow through and do what's necessary. I need to drop out. That's okay. It's easier to replace a player when an event is starting or about to start than it is when the event is in when you're in the middle of the event. So that's really important. As an umpire, make sure that you have a plan to manage the dropouts, because people will drop out the longer a game goes, and the longer you go between updates, the more likely it is that players are going to drop out. And again, when players drop out, this can also create burnout for the umpire, because now the umpire has to say, okay, everybody, hold the game. I have to replace a player. And unless you have a waiting list or a pool of people you can call in, or you have a plan for this, you're going to be in trouble. So decide in advance if this is somebody you're going to bot if they drop out, or if you're going to replace them. It's good for players to have kind of lieutenants or understudies, so you can plug in the understudy or whatever. There are ideas for these things, but I really think the longer a game goes, the more likely it is things are going to break. So it's just better to have short, curated experiences that are smaller, that run faster, with updates every day or 2 or 3 days at the most. And players need to understand the commitment up front, and you should put a long planning period into it. And if you do it right, the reward will be there. The players will reward you with their thanks and with their delight, and they're going to talk about the event for days to come, and they're going to be very excited. So that's what I would suggest. Those are my tips for how to manage burnout in Kriegsspiel. We take a quick look at the YouTube here, and it says here, Lancer says, agree that an 8-hour game is too long, but what if you break that game into 2 4-hour sessions or 3 3-hour sessions? Is that feasible? And I would say absolutely yes. I think that's a great strategy for those longer events. That's exactly the way to do it. In fact, people will be anxious and excited to come back and play the next quarter or the next half, if you will, because you're doing that. That's the way to do it. And it also gives them a time to kind of pause and think about what they want to do next, reflect on the decisions they've made so far, and daydream about what they're going to do. And that's really one of the big rewards of Kriegsspiel is you get to kind of daydream and plan and role play in your mind. What would I do in this situation? What's going to happen next? That's fun. That's a lot of fun. That's the distraction of a hobby, and I really think that's a great way to do it. Joseph says, I am interested in too many topics. You're doing great. Please keep going. You're 50% better than everyone else. Well, thank you. I appreciate the compliment. And there you go. That's how you fight burnout, right? Just a little message of thank you and appreciation is oftentimes all it takes to give a person that little boost or that little energy to keep going. So remember to thank your umpires and encourage them, especially if you notice that they seem to be getting a little tired. Also, if you can, offer to help out. If you can help out, that's a big deal for umpires, especially in these bigger, longer events. Joseph says, please allow me in the Vietnam Kriegsspiel. I'm a combat Vietnam War vet researching Southeast Asia 1900 to present. Now, Joseph, I would do that if I could, but the game is well underway, and I am not the umpire. I am a player in the game. The master umpire for that is a guy named Swick, S-W-I-C. You could reach out to him, though. He may have a role for you in the game. It's on a separate server, so what I would do is I would go into IKS General Chat, type at SWIC, which is Swick, tag him, and say, I'm interested in your Vietnam game, and hopefully he will see that message, and he will reach out to you and give you an invite to the server and plug you in as somewhere if there's an opening or put you on a list of alternates, because if people drop out, we're going to need to replace them, and you'll be a good fit. So thank you. Theo says, you don't know how important organization is. I hosted a game today, and I messed with the timing, and in the end, no one was happy with the resolution at the end. Yeah, and that happens. And remember, umpires are people too. They make mistakes. They screw things up. They do things, it happens just like players in real life. Sometimes you lose. Sometimes it just ends in an epic disaster. And all I can tell you is try to learn from the disaster so that the next time you come back and play, it's not repeated. Because you will. If you play Kriegsspiel long enough, if you run enough events, you're going to have events that just fall apart. Players either don't kind of follow the script that you set for them, which is a common problem, or you failed to prepare for something. You didn't think something through enough. It happens because you're human. First of all, I'm going to tell you, give yourself some grace. It's okay to fail because you, even though you're the umpire, you're also learning. This is why you should try to run smaller, shorter events because it's easier to deal with that. And the players, it's a little bit more intimate, so the players will be a little less harsh on you. And, you can work, it's just easier to solve problems. If you have a big game like a monster and it collapses in a disaster, you're going to be in big, big trouble because you're going to have a hard time. It's going to taint your reputation. But if you run a small event and it ends in a disaster, then you can kind of in the debrief talk to the players and first of all, be honest. Admit when you mess up. Just say, hey, I messed up. I didn't prepare enough or I did not foresee this, which is usually the problem. It's usually not always a lack of preparation. There are things that you didn't foresee that happened. And it's just like being in the military, right? Generals don't always win. Generals often lose because there are things they couldn't foresee, things they didn't plan for. There was a problem. They didn't understand the situation correctly because of limited intel. It's the same thing for players. It's the same thing for umpires. It's the same thing for real-life commanders in the military. You run into these situations and, hey, you lose. So, again, you try to you learn from it and correct it, but the best way to learn from it is to have a long period of practice and training where you're running smaller exercises before you move on to the bigger ones. So that would be my advice, but also give yourself some grace. It's okay to mess up. Talk to the players, invite honest feedback, let them know that you appreciate their feedback, even if it hurts, even if it's negative. Take it seriously, internalize what you think is valuable, because not all the feedback they're going to give you is valuable, useful, or legitimate. Some of it's crap just because they're lashing out. But take that feedback, filter it, take the stuff that's usable to you, and then implement it. And let people know that, hey, I've learned this lesson from this experience. Let's try again. Let's do the next one. And people will be a lot more positive. But yeah, don't defend yourself. Don't argue. Just take it and just say, you're right, you're right, you're right. Agree. But take notes and filter through it. Because chances are these players, even if they're presenting their feedback to you in a negative way, even if they're cross or upset with you, a lot of times there's a gem in there. There is something useful. A lot of times they are correct on some aspect. They might be wrong in one way or in a big way or in the main, but there's usually some kernel of truth to what they're saying. And again, you can't be offended. I have a personal rule. You can't be offended if it's true. If someone says something to me that's true that I don't like, I'm not allowed to be offended at it. Because once you're offended by the truth, you're in deep, deep trouble. So that'll happen. It's rude. It's wrong. It's not the way that people should express criticism. But if it's true, don't get offended. Try to deal with the issue. So that's my way to handle that. Theo says, maybe I put too much on myself. That's possible. Because now I don't know the details of your event or your game. But I would also say that if you get bucked from a horse, right, you get kicked out of the saddle, the way to win is not to say, I'm not gonna ride a horse anymore. I'm gonna forget that. You just get back up on the horse. Hang on, are we even? Yeah, we're working. Okay. So that's the thing to do. Get right back up on that horse and try again. Okay. Don't let the horse buck you off and beat you. Okay. Let's see here. Achilles says success is found in how you respond to failure. I've learned that 100% of the time. I think failure can be great. Failure is glorious. Everybody should experience a lot of failure and minimal success, at least to start, because I think that's how you learn to overcome adversity. That's how you learn lessons that you might not be able to learn any other way. Look, it's great if you can read a book and learn the lesson. It's great if you can look at other people's failures and learn the lesson, but some people, they don't learn that way. You know, there are some people who can understand just by observing. There are some people who can understand by being told. But then there are people who can't understand at all, no matter what. What do? You know, you can work with the first two. There's nothing you can do for the third one. You can't understand it for them. I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. I'm sorry. And that's just how it is. And you want to try to put yourself in one of those other categories. So look at failure as an opportunity to learn, okay? Look at it, no matter what it is. Even if it's actual military and you're commanding troops and some people die, that's horrible, right? But at the same time, you're not going to be any use to anyone if you let the failure overwhelm you, you know? If that's the case, you need to resign your commission and do something else. Become go fishing, play golf. I don't know. Take on another job. Become a salesperson, sell insurance. I don't care. Do something else. Otherwise, learn from the experience, get back in the saddle and ride that horse. Okay? All right. Let's see here. Thiel says 100 years long campaign and the first battle was a disaster. Okay, so it sounds like you're trying to run a really long campaign game, and I'm going to conclude with this because I need to wrap up. But Theo, I'll say that it is frequent that the opening is a disaster, whether it's Pearl Harbor or any other kind of campaign. Look at Red versus Blue. Red versus Blue is this perpetual campaign that we've been trying to run, and the opening was a disaster. Actually, the opening was glorious, but after the glorious opening was wrapped up, we went into sort of a phase two, and phase two opened with a disaster. And you kind of roll with it, and it created a really rich and interesting experience for everyone, because we were able to kind of overcome and roll with it. So again, my advice is the same. Dust yourself off, get back in the saddle, and keep riding the horse. But try to correct the problems that you ran into. If you need more planning, plan. If you need more help, recruit help. Whatever it is that you need to do, but get back up on the horse. And again, try to roll with what happens. This is something we expect from players. I think it's reasonable to also expect it from the umpires. If the players do something unexpected, or if there's an unexpected outcome, We as umpires have to accept that. It's just like you might be, the lead, the vanguard, have a nice, big, huge division. And guess what? Your division gets smashed by a core. You walked into a situation where you were vulnerable. You weren't even supposed to go that way, but someone screwed up. You screwed up. Now, what do you do as a player? Do we rewind the clock as an umpire? Do we rewind the clock and say, okay, we're going to give you a second chance. We're going to start over. This wasn't supposed to happen. Absolutely not. That's not Kriegsspiel. That's freaking Candyland. We're not playing Candyland, folks. We're going to tell that player, you have to deal now with the situation. You've lost a third of your division. You're facing a core. Now what do? What's your next turn? Sucks to be you, but what are your orders? I'm sorry, what are your orders? What are your orders? Give me your orders. No orders? Okay, you're going to lose another third of your division. Better give me orders. You roll with it, and it's the same thing for an umpire. The players did something you didn't expect. They broke the scenario. They broke the campaign. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to throw your hands up and quit, go play Candyland? Maybe you should. But I would advise that you dust yourself off and get back up on that horse and improvise. Do what you expect the players to do. It's a good standard, and it's the least that can be expected of an umpire. So get up there and do that. And if you need help, get help. If you need to correct something, correct it. If you need feedback from the players, accept that feedback and process it and keep rolling. But the big thing, I think, is, again, don't eat filet mignon and lobster every day. There's a lot of people who do that. They burn themselves out on Kriegsspiel, because to me, Kriegsspiel is the filet mignon. It is the surf and turf of the gaming world. It is a treat, though. Do not eat the treat for every meal, because while that sounds amazing, you're gonna get tired of it. You're gonna burn out. So pace yourself and put yourself in situations where you set yourself up for success with longer planning periods, shorter events, smaller events that go smoothly, and don't do that all the time. Be choosy, just run them when you can. Run in 2 or 3 events like that a year. You will stay engaged, you will not burn out, you will have a good time, and your life will be balanced, and it'll be rewarding that way. People who survive for a long time doing hobbies, whether they're building, old cars, or they're playing some sport, they're playing golf, they're involved in a computer game or a gaming world or community, those are the ones who stick around the longest, the ones who pace themselves, not the ones who sprint because they get excited and they run themselves to exhaustion. So there you go. That's my advice for how to survive burnout in Kriegsspiel. I hope somebody finds it useful and puts some of these lessons to work. And that's all I have to say. So that's it for today. Thank you all for watching and attending, and I will see you